not taking any chances with my tomatoes this year. Though I usually have them in the ground by now, this year's unpredictable and cold weather has made me cautious. The last thing I want is to lose them to an unexpected frost. So my tomatoes are still in pots, and with help from my cold frames, I've been gradually hardening them off over the last couple weeks. The hardening off process helps tomatoes gradually acclimate to a number of environmental factors they don't encounter in a grow room or south-facing window, including strong direct sun, wind, rain, colder temperatures, wide temperature fluctuations, and variation in water supply as a result of evaporation. My cold frames help moderate some of these factors and are a great tool to help ease the transition to the outdoors. They provide shade, warmth, and protection from wind and rain, thereby helping prevent sunburn, windburn, and breakage. They also save time because I'm able to keep the tomatoes outside on some cold nights and during heavy winds and rain when I'd otherwise have to bring them indoors. It's best to start hardening off plants on a weekend or other time when you have a couple days to spend some time with them. I started hardening off my tomatoes by placing them in a cold frame on a cool, overcast, rainy day. I thoroughly watered the plants to account for increased evaporation and to ensure they weren't deprived of water while adapting to their new environment. I checked the temperature inside the cold frame to make sure it was between 60 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit and kept the tomatoes inside for about 4 hours before bringing them back into the house. The second day wasn't as overcast, so I placed the tomatoes in the cold frame with a shade cloth on top. I left them there for about 6 hours before bringing them back indoors. The third day they spent the whole day in the cold frame. During the day the cold frame was covered with a shade cloth and at night with the glass top. If the temperature had been below 45 degrees, I would have brought the tomatoes inside even with the protection of the cold frame. On the fourth day I removed the glass top and let the tomatoes soak up some sun. The temperatures were in the 70s during the day and warm enough at night to leave the tomatoes outside all night without the top on. Even with the top off, the cold frame protected the tomatoes from the wind. On the fifth day, I removed the tomatoes from the cold frame. The weather was warm and mild enough to leave them outside without any protection, but even exposure to the mild wind that day helped strengthen and acclimate the plants. Since the fifth day, I've kept the tomatoes outside in the elements whenever possible. I've continued to return them to the cold frame on occasion when they needed protection from cool temperatures, heavy rains, and wind. This week we've had nights with temperatures in the low 40s. On these nights I've brought the tomatoes back into the house. On nights that were between 45 and 50 degrees, the tomatoes spent the night in the cold frame. I was always very careful to only cover the cold frame on cool, overcast days and cool nights. Covering the cold frame even on a sunny, cool day could have easily resulted in temperatures well above 90 degrees, which could have cooked the plants. I also vented the cold frame when needed to keep the temperature around 60 to 80 degrees. Whenever possible, though, I kept the cover off entirely. During this process, I kept a close eye on the weather forecast, which has been a big help in determining what protection, if any, the tomatoes needed. Looking ahead at the 10-day forecast, I don't see any expected lows under 45 degrees, so I'll go ahead and plant my tomatoes today. Now that they've hardened off, they should be acclimated enough to thrive outside on their own. Of course, I'll continue to monitor the forecast and will cover the tomatoes with plastic if temperatures dip to 40 degrees or below. And if all goes well, we hope to have a tomato harvest even better than last year's. Well, that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching. And until next time, remember, you can change the world 1 yard at a time.